If you know yourself, you better go and get your passport right now so that no opportunity will pass you by. Getting a visa can be very, very stressful, but let me tell you something. Contrary to popular beliefs, applying for visa is the least complicated thing when traveling internationally. Hello everyone and welcome back to my YouTube channel. If this is your first time visiting, welcome, and if you are a new subscriber to my channel, thank you so much for coming back to my channel. In today's video, as you can see by the title, we will be talking about why you need to start traveling now. If you have been thinking and procrastinating traveling, this is your sign that you need to start executing. I will be giving you a more high-level tips and tricks and just some requirements that you just need to have in order to start traveling. So we're going to start with local or national travel. In this section, I'm just referring to traveling within your country, states, or territories. That is always the easiest way to start dipping your foot into traveling. Like let's say, for example, I live in the US and there are so many states that I haven't had the chance to travel yet. And so this year I made it a point to start visiting new states. And two of the states that I visited, which I have actually not traveled to before, were California and Texas. So I had a chance to visit those two states and it was also part of my travel experience. If you're within a country and you want to start traveling, I would recommend start traveling interstate or inter-territory, just because that's kind of a way for you to start getting yourself exposed and getting used to the whole concept of traveling. The thing is, we already have people from all over the world flying into where we are to explore, and I always try to tell people, try to explore what's around you. Your community also have a lot of touristy things to offer, resort styles and vacation and vacation style experience that I think you can start experiencing it locally. When you start traveling locally, the form of identification that you technically usually just need is a driver's license or just a state ID that you have. You don't necessarily need to get an international passport to start traveling locally. So you can start using, even a school ID may work for you to start traveling around state. And sometimes you don't even need any ID, because if you want to just travel by road, I don't think that you would need to show your ID to anything. But I would always say, anytime you travel, just make sure that you have a form of identification on you, just in case something goes down. I always recommend having an international passport, because that is like the best form of ID to have, especially whenever you're traveling, whether locally or internationally. So moving into international travels, I would highly recommend to start traveling within your continent. You know what I mean? So if you are in Africa, I would recommend that you start traveling to other African countries too. Most likely there are visa-free destinations for you to go to within your own continent. So like in the US, you don't necessarily need a visa if you want to travel to Mexico or Canada. If you're probably an immigrant living in the US, for example, you may need a US form of identification in order to travel to those other countries, or you may need to get visa to travel to either Mexico or Canada. If you were traveling within your continent, I think there are some visa-free places that you can start looking into, that you can start traveling, because those are technically the easiest way to start traveling internationally when you don't have to apply for a visa. Most likely what you need are your flight ticket and accommodation. Usually those flight tickets have to be round trip to show that you would be going in for a certain period of time and also leaving the country when you're supposed to. So that's that when it comes to traveling to visa-free countries. I will highly recommend looking up all the visa-free countries that you can travel using the current passport that you have. Speaking of passport, if you have not gotten your passport, this is your sign to go get your passport right now, because I don't know why you still don't have an international passport. I recommend getting it, because once you have it, sometimes you start attracting things, like traveling abroad and new countries, exploring new things just by getting yourself an international passport. It can be so disappointing when you want to travel or an opportunity comes for you to travel and you're being asked if you have an international passport and your answer is no. That is how opportunities can easily pass you by. So if you know yourself, you better go and get your passport right now so that no opportunity will pass you by. Next, traveling to countries that require visa. Where do we start? This is the thick part of this video because I'm sure if you're trying to start traveling abroad internationally, it is likely that you may need a visa to travel to that destination. Getting a visa can be very, very stressful, but let me tell you something. Contrary to popular beliefs, applying for a visa is the least complicated thing when traveling internationally. The most complicated thing is making sure that you are actually in a position to travel to that country. I will explain. Sometimes you can have your visa, but you can still not enter into those countries because you usually have to have a valid reason for traveling into that country. So you may get your visa, but you may not be able to still travel. Either obviously a pandemic could happen, God forbid a war can happen and people can start closing their borders and you may not be able to travel. So in this video I will tell you things that you should be prepared and have whenever you're traveling internationally, especially to countries that require a visa. Okay, let's talk about the visa process. The most popular form of visa is tourist visa. I want to use some of the popular countries as an example when traveling. I myself, I have had my experience of applying for visa. I've applied for a United States visa, I have applied for Canadian visa, and I have applied for United Kingdom visa. Out of the three, the easiest visa that I actually got was all three of them. Honestly, they have really been, I've never been rejected when it came to applying for this three countries, and it has actually been a seamless, the process has been pretty easy for me, and I did it by myself while being a student, so I can tell you some of the things that I did which you need to make sure that you're following. The most important thing is you have to know the requirement. If you don't know the requirements for applying for a visa, you're just shooting yourself in the foot. So you have to know what the requirements are when you're trying to travel to a new location. There is nothing special about wealthy people who travel abroad versus just regular people who travel abroad. It's just information, and equipping yourself with right information will put you in a really good position to travel internationally. One of the most important thing to have, which is always the number one requirement on any visa application, is a passport. You need to have an unexpired passport, which needs to be valid for at least 6 months of when you're about to travel. So it needs to be valid for at least 6 months when your visa is going to get stamped on it. Another requirement that you need to have during that process is you need to have a reason for the visa. So there are different types of visa. There is visit visa or tourist visa, there is business, there is student visa, there is an immigrant who's trying to live permanently in that country, they have that visa. But in this video specifically, I just want to be focusing on visit visa because I'm trying to get you to start traveling. So in order to start with your visit visa, you need to make sure you have your passport and know that you are applying for a visitor's visa. Now you have to look into the requirements for having a visitor's visa. Most likely you need an invitation letter when you are trying to go to another country based on a visitor's visa. Some of the ways that you can get invitation letters could be through a host. So if you're going to see a family member or a friend, they can write a letter inviting you to that country. Another way you can get an invitation letter is through an event. So if you're going to another country for an event, you can get the organizers of that event or the host of those events to write you an official invitation letter that you will be attending that invitation from that certain period of time to another period of time. It's important that they need to indicate how long you would be there, where you will be staying while you're there, and they will take full responsibility when it comes to non-immigrant visas, or they will take responsibility of you being there. The reason why an official invitation letter needs to be written is because the government needs to have somebody in the country that they can reach out to if they're trying to get a hold of you or something. It could be a friend, a family member, a host of an event. If you're going for religious reasons, if you're going for a church event, you just need to get the church to write you a letter to tell the embassy or immigration office that you will be traveling there. Here's a disclaimer. Someone who is visiting that country cannot write you an invitation letter to come. It has to be someone of permanent residency or citizenship in that country who can write you a letter. So if your family member is inviting you over, that person either has to be a permanent resident or needs to be a US citizen to be able to invite you there. Other things are kind of here and there. Sometimes you have to prove to the embassy or the immigration office that you have strong ties to your country. There's some countries that's important. There's some that's not really important. Usually in the application, they always ask you what you do. You need to put something tangible. Either you're a student, you're a current student in your home country, you have a job, you have a business that you're running, and you will be coming back. So sometimes you have to put in those occupations so that you can show ties to your country. People mistake it for when you go to a visa interview. The thing is, a visa interview is just for them to get to know you. That's what it is. It's not really, they are not screening your document when you come for visa interview. Sometimes you don't necessarily have to bring too much documents, because when they ask you questions like who's gonna fund your trip, you can say yourself, and you can just tell them, here I have a bank statement to support that I will be sponsoring my trip myself. No one is going to ask you, do you have properties in your home country? Show me your transcript in your home country. They just want to gauge a conversation and understand who you are as a person, if you're going to be able to travel, if they would be able to allow you to travel into their country. I can do a more in-depth video when it comes to visa interviews, because I have had some relationship with some, immigration officers who do visa interviews, and I've had conversations with them. And based on my experience with doing some visa interviews, I can kind of tell you what really goes into that. So if you're able to fill out the visa application properly with no problem, then you can start thinking about your travel method. So if you're either going to travel by road into that country, or by air, or by boat, it's up to you. Just make sure that you book your travel round trip. It is important that if you're visiting a location, you have to have a round trip ticket. You can't book one way. No one's going to allow you into their country if you're visiting on a one-way flight ticket. You have to show a round trip that you will be coming back, and you have to make sure that you will keep to that date and return back home. Now, which that leads us into the topic of funding. So you want to travel, but you don't have that much money in your pocket. Let's talk about that. The reason why I say this is sometimes you have to cut your coat according to your size. If you don't have money to travel from Nigeria to Santorini, you don't necessarily have to travel to Santorini right now. You can travel to Ghana. You can travel to Benin. You can travel to Kenya. You can travel to South Africa. You know what I mean? You can still travel. You can travel to the Gambia. There are so many people from other countries who are traveling to these locations. So you don't necessarily, if you don't have the funds for it, it doesn't mean that your travel days are over. Here's the thing, there are some countries that require you to have a huge amount of money or a substantial amount of money to be able to travel. For example, when I was in the US, I applied for my Canadian and UK visa. I did not necessarily have the amount of money in my account, but I just wanted to still apply for the visa. Sometimes you have to take that risk. I still was able to show an account that showed that I was capable. Like I had a job, I included my pay stubs, that, it didn't mean I had all the money in my account at that point. I was a student, I was working, and it showed that if I work, I would be able to save up to travel. I'm just going for a touristy thing. I'm a student and I will come back. And I was able to get that visa that way. So sometimes you don't necessarily have to show them you have 10 million naira or $1 million or $10,000 in your account in order to travel. You want to travel? You will travel. They won't let you into the country if you don't have a flight ticket anyway. So you just have to show a good sense of faith. Another way that you can fund your trip internationally is looking for sponsorship. This is more so in the category of if you have someone who is inviting you and taking up financial responsibility of you coming over. You can have someone who would accommodate you, who will host you where you are so you don't have to pay hotel fees, and you can maybe save up for your flight ticket going and coming back. And then they could also say, hey, I will take responsibility of this person. You can also show that person's income during your visa interview. So sometimes if you don't have the funds, but the other person inviting you has the funds, they can show their own proof of funds on your behalf. It is important that you follow visa requirements. Most likely what you need is just your international passport, your visa application fee, your proof of travel, meaning your flight ticket that is round trip, your proof of accommodation. You don't always have to stay in a hotel. Someone else can be hosting you, which that can be included in the letter. 70% of the time when you're applying for a visa, you don't necessarily need to have the flights booked. All the times I applied for a visa, none of my flights were booked. I was just going to tell them, hey, I want to go to this country to go visit on this date. Obviously my flight is not booked. I mean, I didn't say that, my flight wasn't booked. I just said I wanted a visa. I'm going for touristy things. I am a student, so I'm going to be doing it during the holidays, which means that I have to come back to go back to school. And I was able to give them a valid reason why they should give me that visa. For those people who don't have a reason to travel, or who are looking for something that would give them a reason to travel, what are some of the things that you always look forward to, or things that interest you in other countries? For example, if you're into film, is there like a film conference for cinematographers happening in Los Angeles, for example, right? You can look into those events, reach out to the organizers of the events to tell them, hey, you would love to attend, but these are the requirements that you need in order to travel, and see if they will support you in providing those documents. 9 out of 10, they would say yes, because if it's an event you're willing to come to, you purchase your tickets, they will support you. If it's a church conference that's in another country, reach out to the church. They should write you an official letter. Go and apply for the visa. I'm telling you, you never know what it is that you never know what it is that will get you to travel to another location. Another thing, weddings. If you're going to a wedding in another country, maybe your friend or someone is having a destination wedding, you can reach out to them and tell them, hey, I need a letter to travel to your country or wherever country it is that you're having your wedding. They will give you an invitation letter that's saying that their wedding is happening and you will be there. So there are so many reasons that you can start traveling. You can start small and work your way up. That's exactly how I started. Now all I want to do when I have time and money is travel. Please and please stop procrastinating. Apply for that visa. Just do it. If they say no, you do it again. There is no law anywhere that says you are going to be banned from applying for visa if you get rejected. Hey, Nigerians know it. There are people who have applied for visa up to 10 times and they still do it, and they will eventually get it. Thank you so much if you made it this far to this video. I really appreciate you. Thank you. Thank you so much. And if you have any questions, like I said, leave it down in the description box below, and I will see you guys in my next video. Take care of yourself. Bye.